Welcome back, everybody. There really is only one story in town, and that's the impending appointment of Ralf Rangnick as Manchester United's interim manager following the sacking of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Now, at the time of recording, it is not yet a done deal in terms of signed, sealed and delivered, but it's almost there. Rangnick, who is 63 and a doyen of football coaching and directors of football from Germany, has reached an agreement with Manchester United to take over on a 6-month contract with then 2 subsequent years in a consultancy role. That is a story that was broken exclusively on The Athletic. And while we're on that subject, we are running an unbeatable Black Friday deal that sees you guys take advantage of this offer for £1 or $1 per month for 12 months. So don't miss that. Now, let's get stuck into Ralf Rangnick and Manchester United. Delighted to be joined by Adam Crafton and Raphael Honigstein from The Athletic. And I'm going to begin by throwing it over to you, Raf. Tell us a little bit more about this deal and what needs to be done to get it over the line.
I don't think there is much that needs to be done apart from really administrative stuff. After Brexit, it's not so straightforward to just arrive and start working as an EU citizen. They need to look into his qualifications. Does he fit any exemptions? Do they have to go some different route because he's only managed a certain amount of time over the last 5 years? It's all really boring regulatory stuff. I don't think that there are any big obstacles left. I think we would have heard by now. I think the story that you had would have been put in much more cautious terms if there was a suggestion that there's still something that might come up that would derail this. I don't think there is. You never know, but it looks as if it's going to be happening pretty soon.
Yeah, and of course he's in a role at Lokomotiv Moscow at the moment. I've spoken to Manchester United and they are trying to be as respectful as possible towards his current employers. A deal needs to be agreed with them to extract him from a 3-year contract that I think he signed only in July, and he was embarking upon what he would have hoped to be a very exciting project there. But when an opportunity like this at Manchester United comes calling, the chance to work in the Premier League, which I presume has been a lifelong ambition of Ralf Rangnick, now you can't really turn it down. He was previously heavily linked with Chelsea, heavily sounded out by Chelsea on taking the job there on an interim basis when Frank Lampard was sacked. But I don't think there were any assurances about staying on beyond that period in charge. Whereas Manchester United have clearly offered an enticing prospect for him to do 2 years in a consultancy role. And I think the reaction, judging by the reaction that I've seen, that's an exceptional opportunity for Manchester United as well to get somebody of Ralf Rangnick's caliber and background. And that's where I'm going to throw this over to Adam initially. What level of a coup is this, Adam, for Manchester United in terms of what he will bring, the way in which he may benefit existing people at Manchester United, and why is there such a positive reaction so far?
Well, I think, first of all, you have to think that for the last 7 or 8 years, Manchester United fans have, I think, grown used to the club being quite obvious in their decision-making. Jose Mourinho is available, let's get Jose Mourinho. Solskjaer comes in and has a few good games, so we're going to keep him. I think with Ralf Rangnick, it's the first time for a while that there's been this sense of, the club could be being a bit brave here. There's a bit of ambition, a slight change of direction. I think also after the Solskjaer period, where, for all of Solskjaer's strengths, he was maybe criticised for the quality of coaching and tactics and the technical understanding of the game. And I think in Rangnick, United have maybe gone to an extent to the opposite end of that scale by getting someone who is known, not only for developing players, but developing coaches. This is something that, we've not always seen in English football. So it's a very exciting thing, I think, for United. First of all, for the players, right? We have to remember his first job for the next 6 months is to get some results and also to get Manchester United playing good football. How long has it been since Manchester United have controlled games and dominated matches and had a real sense of purpose about them. So that's his first job. Then the second job is structurally. He goes in a consultancy role from the summer, unless we see that sort of repeat Solskjaer situation where he goes on a fantastic run, and who knows, if we get to April and he's won all his games, who knows where that leads. But the plan at the moment is he goes in for 6 months, Manchester United then appoint a permanent manager, and then he goes and he's available to them for 2 years, and how they use him will be their decision. But for people such as John Murtough, who is the football director, for Darren Fletcher, who is the technical secretary, and also for the expected new CEO, which will be Richard Arnold, who is not, he doesn't claim to be an expert on the football side of the business, and he doesn't want to be learning on the job on the football recruitment, development side. He wants to delegate, he wants to have the right people in place, and he wants to take advice. So I think it's hugely encouraging that United are taking these steps.
The information I have coming out of Old Trafford as we record this is that John Murtough was the driving force behind this appointment. Of course, there was a process with a number of candidates spoken to, but it seems that Ralf Rangnick has emerged head and shoulders above the rest. And after a number of potential opportunities to join English clubs, consideration, I wrote about it on The Athletic in 2018. He was on Arsenal's shortlist. Tottenham have looked at him in the past. West Bromwich Albion, I'm sure many more as well. It looks like he's on his way to Old Trafford, Raf. And for him, that may be a bit of a culmination of a lifetime's ambition.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think that explains also his readiness to take on a role that perhaps would have looked a little bit beneath him on the face of it. Only 6 months, he didn't want to do that for Chelsea when it was even only 4 months. But I think United, with the ability to then stay on and influence things and really leave them in a much better place, which he has done at every single club, even if it's taken years later for players to emerge as coaches or for some of the structures to bear fruit. I think it was just too tempting, too romantic, too exciting an offer for him to turn down. And of course, it does also leave open the door of future employment elsewhere. I mean, he has only coached 2 years in the last 10, but being back at the biggest stage in the Champions League with Man United, fighting for top 4, fighting maybe for the FA Cup, and who knows what can happen, as we saw with Thomas Tuchel and his incredible impact, that then can lead to other things. So I think it was just so many things that were right for him. And as Adam said, and I think that's a really good point worth reiterating, we often see clubs reaching for the exact opposite when something doesn't work out. So Solskjaer was the nice guy. Solskjaer was the Man United guy. Solskjaer was the ex-player. Solskjaer was living off the vibes of the past. Rangnick is in many ways the opposite. Epitomizes structure, process, method, knowledge. People in Germany almost see him as a little bit cold because he tends to do this job at different places and then moves on. I think people find it hard to relate to him the way they do to Klopp with his very emotional way. But because United are crying out for all these things, I think they could have done a lot worse.
Yeah, I'll weave in a little bit more info on this potential appointment. And as well as John Murtough, I think Darren Fletcher was involved in the conversations as well. And he's somebody I'm sure who will look to learn off of Ralf Rangnick in his kind of executive position at Manchester United, director of football. And also, of course, Ed Woodward in the conversations, Richard Arnold, Matt Judge are in that hierarchy as well. And Adam touched upon a very interesting point that Richard Arnold is looking, if he is going to be taking over in Ed Woodward's previous capacity, to be a bit more hands-off on the football side and let experts such as Ralf Rangnick do the work.
Ralf talks a lot about the 3 C's, and they stand for concept, competence, and capital. And I think these 3 things can all be implemented, if you will, or are all there in one way or another at Man United. Certainly the capital is there. But I think with him, there's a real hope that the competence and the concept will also be there. And I think that is the key attraction, not just for the team and for the next 6 months, but beyond that.
There's been this void of identity at Manchester United for the last few years. Their identity has almost just been, we're Man United. We do things the Man United way. And if you actually ask people at the club what that means, no one can really explain that, because it's, we do it how we've always done it with Alex Ferguson. We play attacking football, but they've not really played attacking football. They've played counter-attacking football in certain games, and they've struggled to break teams down. So I think there's actually a real vacuum there for Rangnick to go in and actually impose whatever his vision is of how these players can maximise their potential, and actually quite a lot of freedom as well. For all of United's structural flaws, they're not a club that are, putting coaches under pressure to pick certain players. They're not a club that's overbearing, I think, in terms of interfering with first team matters. They don't always get things right in terms of the decisions they make in the transfer market, but I don't think they're sort of an overbearing influence. So I think, again, it's just that freedom and potential to really stamp his personality over the club.
They seem to have made an industry-leading decision, and they would be bringing in somebody that would fit right in amongst some of the very best in the game, and especially in the Premier League. But Raf, does he have the time to get a tune out of these players? Does he have the time to influence the hierarchy? We know how quickly things can change in football, but results need to come and quick.
Yeah, I mean, the worry is, of course, that there's almost no time to have proper training sessions, because every other day there's a game now, especially with the Christmas period coming up. You're always in recovery mode. So any instructions, any real changes tend to happen by video analysis. And some players respond better to that than others. So, yeah, it's not going to be easy. I think now at his age, I think he has the experience to relate to players. I think something maybe 20 years ago, it would have been much more difficult for him, being very set in his ways. I think he's much more empathetic. You speak to former players who tell you just what a nice guy. There's sort of a father figure that can really relate to you and your problems. So I think he's a more rounded person. I don't think he's necessarily mellowed in the meantime, but I think he's able to, as we have seen with coaches like Heinkes, for example, or Hiddink, to just take this wealth of experience that you've amassed from 30, sometimes 40 years of coaching, and relate to the situations at hand. You've kind of seen these things before. You would have seen certain problems in the dressing room, problems with tactics, problems how teams work and the hierarchy. You've seen them before, and you know sort of where to push the right buttons and pull the right levers to get an immediate improvement. And United, I think, have a lot of ingredients to be successful. Yes, there are problems in the squad. There are issues in midfield, as we all know. But I think with a bit of organized cohesion, with a bit of planning, with a bit of a sense of what it is we're supposed to be doing out on the pitch beyond just expressing ourselves and having a good time, I think a lot can be gained. And in the past, I think, and this is something again that you hinted at, David, I think a club like Man United would have been very wary of taking in a coach who hasn't worked in the Premier League before, hasn't even worked at a real blue chip club before, is a foreigner, is a little bit different. He doesn't fit the existing mold, but the mold has changed. And I think now, with Tuchel being the latest guys who just come in from the cold and immediately being successful, and everyone who doubted him because he hadn't coached in the Premier League before, didn't know the league, which is one of those wonderful cliches. I think people are beginning to change their mind and are beginning to realize that quality and know-how supersedes experience and a sense of having done it before in the Premier League.
Now, I think also, United have invested quite a lot of time into people such as Michael Carrick over the past few years. I mean, Michael Carrick has been there through it all, through Ferguson, Moyes, Van Gaal, Mourinho, Solskjaer, and I think he will also form part of Rangnick's staff as well, unless he decides to step away. I imagine what they'll do is they'll probably give Rangnick one or two, maybe three people that he can bring in that know his methods a little bit better. But I think they'll also want to give Carrick, Fletcher that opportunity. Certainly Darren Fletcher, I don't expect to be leaving, and Carrick also, I would think the sort of more vulnerable ones may be those individuals that had worked with Solskjaer before, maybe in Norway, for example. So we'll see a little bit with how that goes. I think maybe the really interesting one could be Kieran McKenna, who's not been, depending who you speak to, some people think he's got the potential to be an outstanding first team coach, head coach one day. Other people closer to the players suggest that they found him a little bit schoolmasterly at times and that he's sort of lost his impact a little bit as this season's worn on. But the club might look at it and think, we've invested time, we've invested money into these young coaches. A bit of time under Ralf Rangnick would actually be super valuable for them. And that they should be looking at this as well as, what can I learn over this next 6 months? And maybe I'll then form part of the staff with whoever it is that comes in the summer.